Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast, where I talk with the world's leading thinkers, planners, and doers who are helping to build great companies in their own way. We learn how the work they're doing is creating an impact and get to know a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. Also, you can check out our books, Made to Thrive, outlining how to be a great CEO, as well as Onboarded, which is about making your new hires more effective faster. Today we welcome Mike Mirau back to the podcast, and this time we're going deeper into the world of family business. Mike's the founder of Proactive Leadership Group, where he helps mid-market leaders grow healthy, scalable companies with strong cultures and clear accountability. His team has coached over 1,000 companies across 100 industries, and their focus is always the same: practical systems that drive real results. You can find them at resultsimproved.com. I guess Mike's a thinker, a planner, and a doer. Alongside his coaching work, he also owns Tribute Printing Solutions, a specialty printing business run by his daughter and son-in-law in Garland, Texas. His new book, The Family Business Manifesto, is a guide for owners who want peace at home and prosperity at work. But it's not just theory, it's grounded in decades of coaching, research, and personal experience. Today, we dig into what makes family businesses different, what breaks them, and how to build something that lasts across generations. Mike, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. I must say I thoroughly enjoyed our first conversation. I probably enjoy all of our conversations, to be frank. So the pleasure is actually somewhat mine. So let's start here. I mean, you've got a family business. Okay?
Right.
You've worked with family business. What are the hidden rules that make or break a family business? And why do so many families get it wrong?
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head right there at the end. Is a lot of people, they don't really understand some of the dynamics that go with having family in a business. And if you think about it, every business is a family business because it's affecting families. Yeah. And so you think about it, and you think about some of the dynamics we see in a family in terms of the quality of the relationships, and what makes a family work very, very much applies to what makes a family business work. You got to have good communication. You've got to manage expectations. You got to have clarity around roles and responsibilities, things along those lines. And when those things are fuzzy or not clear, then it leads to assumption, and a lot of times it's those assumptions that get us into trouble.
Do you see a distinction between when one person works in the family business, as you put it, you said they're kind of the same, and when multiple people from the same family work in the same business?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I remember when I first started my career with Interstate Batteries here in the U.S. And my first day, I had like 4 people come up to me and ask me who I was related to. And I said, well, I'm not related to anybody here. And they're like, well, how did you get the job? Because like everybody in the company was related to the family that owned the business. And I said, well, I just, I have a skill set that they needed and they hired me. So there's so many positives of having family in a business, but you've got to do it the right way. And in the book, we talk about what we call the 5 keys to having a family business success. And the very first one, and when I share these keys, doesn't mean these are easy. Okay? There's no easy in any of this. It's hard, but it's a level of thinking and discipline that you apply to the business that actually makes things a whole lot easier. So the first key is you've got to check the relationship at the door. Okay? Easier said than done. and when you bring that family dynamic into the business, it creates some challenges that you don't have in a traditional employee-employer relationship. And so what we're trying to do is get away from the special treatment that comes when we have family working in the business. And there's a lot of perceived entitlement on the part of the family members, especially if you've got what we call the patriarch, the founder, the person who owns or runs the business. Could be the mom, the dad, it could be the brother, the sister, whatever. But there's always somebody that's in charge, somebody that has ultimate responsibility for the business. Well, when that person brings on a family member, if it's done right, I mean, that's the people that you can trust the most. But the problem is if you bring them in and they begin to take advantage of that relationship, they come in late, they leave early, they don't work as hard. It creates some team dynamics that create problems in the business, but also for the family member who's there as well. They're not treated with the level of respect that another employee would inside the organization. So the first thing is we say check the relationship at the door and say, you've got to look at that family member just like it was any other team member in the organization. The second is you have to have clarity around roles and responsibilities. A lot of times in family businesses, we see positions created for people rather than having a specific responsibility. And so it's the family member needs a job. Well, we'll find them a job and we'll find them something to do rather than having the clarity around these are the seats. Now we've got a seat, them putting them in one of the seats on the bus. And so getting clarity around roles and responsibility gives them a sense, the employee family member, a sense of purpose inside the organization rather than, hey, I'm just here because so-and-so's my dad or my uncle or brother or whatever, and they're giving me a chance. And it really gets some clarity around exactly what they're accountable for and making sure that that's in place. The third thing we say is you've got to treat everybody the same. You can't give them special dispensation just because they're a family member. Now, like I said, it's easier said than done because they've got to, one of the things with my daughter, she doesn't have any children yet, but she has this dog, and it's a beautiful dog, but he is just needy. I mean, he's always got something going on, and she's got to take off from work to take the dog to the vet or do something like that. Well, a normal employee wouldn't necessarily have that kind of freedom, to just hop up and, hey, I got to go run and take the dog to the vet or go buy dog food or whatever. And the thing that she has is she's paid her dues. As when we started the business, I mean, she worked countless hours. Okay, so she's kind of earned the right. But it's when they come in and they haven't paid their dues or haven't earned that right, and they begin to take some of those freedoms that you begin to have challenges. And so the fourth thing we talk about is clarity around values and behaviors. Core values, having clear core values that say this is the way we're going to behave, this is the way we're going to treat each other, this is the way we treat our customers, our vendors, and so on and so forth. And having clarity around that. And when those things are fuzzy, or we have family that doesn't live up to those values, now you create internal tension inside the organization. And then probably the last thing, and this applies not just to the business, but also the family, is make sure there's clear communication. Have the courage to have those hard conversations as you need to. It's, you go back to the book, Candid Conversations, and can you have those candid conversations with a member in the family? Because we get so concerned about hurting somebody's feelings or, upsetting the family. It's like going to Thanksgiving with the cousin that nobody likes. When you got to have those conversations. And so it puts an extra level of pressure on the leader in the organization because they've got to not just navigate the dynamics of the business, but they also have to navigate the dynamics of the family relationship. And so by having some of these things in place, getting that discipline inside the organization, it just makes life so much easier and better. And it's about setting those expectations right up front. And that's a lot of times the leader doesn't do that very well They just kind of assume that they know this is what the expectations are. And it goes back to the stuff you talk about in your book, Onboarding, the fact that you've got to have clarity around what is expected. Because the biggest source of conflict is unmet expectations. And so it's the responsibility of the leader to make sure those expectations are clear.
Every leader, managing director, head of company has a unique set of challenges that many people don't understand until you've sat in that seat. But I feel in my experience that in a family business, for some of the ways that you've touched on, they have a unique additional set of challenges. Can you talk to us about those, if you agree, those additional challenges that the head of a family business experiences?
Well, if you look at the family dynamic first, okay, if you grow up in a family where there's open and honest communication, the children are free to express what they think without fear of retribution from the parent, then that tends to lead to good dynamics inside the business with the family member. But if they grow up in a family where they weren't always given that voice or that opportunity, there's a little bit of intimidation or fear on the part of the team member and the leader because they love and care for this person, but they don't want to hurt their feelings. And there's this constant tension that if I say the wrong thing, that's going to trickle down. And when you look at some of those dynamics, it's getting past that fear of, well, if I say the wrong thing, then, they're not going to come to dinner on Thanksgiving or something like that. And that's actually one of the comments I heard from one of the wives of one of the leaders. She goes, I just want peace at Thanksgiving. I want everybody to come to Thanksgiving so that we all get along. And like half the family works in the business. So it's pretty interesting.
It's really underpinned by our beliefs that everybody is equal in a family. We look at the English royal family and the firstborn son is the ascendant to the throne. And we think it's so antiquated. We don't live in that society now. And so structurally we think to ourselves, this is not how the business is and everyone should be equal. But when you're running a family business, you don't need to adopt the English royal family mantra, but you do need to, we still run in a business. I mean, how do you've said courage and fear a few times. How do you navigate getting to the point where you've got that courage from that base of, well, everyone in a family is equal within reason. Like all the brothers and sisters are equal.
Right. Well, all these things kind of work together. Because when you bring a family member into the business, if you don't have a clear role for them, okay, what are they responsible for? What are they accountable for? Then they're kind of they don't have that sense of I'm making a contribution because I'm here and I'm working hard. They feel like they're there because of the family relationships. They're kind of playing with a lack of confidence or belief in their value to the organization. In the book Great Game of Business, Jack Stack talks about the concept of line of sight. When you can see how what you do affects the business. Well, if that's not clear for the family member, then they don't ever see that line of sight. They don't ever see the value that they bring to the business. And getting that clarified is one of the things that really helps smooth that out so that they know when they show up for work every day and they work hard and they do their job, they're making a substantive contribution to the organization. And without that, there's always that doubt in the back of their mind. Am I here because I'm adding value, or am I here just because that's my dad? That's the
it's such a, when I've seen it play out well, it's such a wonderful leadership growth experience or opportunity. One of the things that you say is that a family business multiplies dysfunction. So what is that? Why is that? And how do you untangle it?
Well, I think if you look up the word dysfunction in the dictionary, you would see the picture of my family tree and my wife's family tree. We come from families of dysfunction, and everybody does. I mean, the whole dynamic of families today is changing. From when I was growing up as a young person in my family, we had our challenges as a family because of different issues with relatives and things like that, and things we would get involved in the family. And the problem you get is when that stuff spills over into the business, we can only focus our energy and attention on so many things.
Yeah.
And when you've got this cloud of this negative family relationship, this dysfunction that is taking your attention away from serving your customer, serving your team, or creating your product, then it's a distraction. And when those distractions get too heavy, then something will suffer. And we've always heard the concepts of the life wheel, that everything in life falls into one of these 6 pie pieces. And, the challenge is one of those pie pieces is family. And if we have a lot of dysfunction there, it spills into everything else in our life. It spills into the relationships that the child or the siblings have with their families. Who has kids? Who doesn't have kids? What are the kids involved in? One of the most successful family businesses I've ever worked with is on the 3rd generation, and the person that is being groomed to be the successor in the family business is amazing. He's just amazing, that all the things that he does and the contribution he makes.
Yeah.
But yet, come summertime, his son plays competitive baseball in different leagues, and sometimes he has to leave on a Friday afternoon to take his son to a baseball tournament or to a baseball game or something like that. And it may mean that he's not there to take care of something with a customer or with a vendor. And you start seeing some of these dynamics, and when that goes on, and he's earned the right. I mean, he is respected. He's earned the right to do that, no doubt. But the challenge is, if people don't know that he's earned that right, they go, well, the only reason he's getting to go is because he's the son of, and it creates this tension inside the business with other members of the team that, it's just, people are always comparing themselves to other people. And the perception is we're all equals. Well, you're not equal if your name is so-and-so.
Yeah. How do you get the rest of the team to know that this person has earned the right?
Well, that's just like any other person in the organization. You have to earn the respect. Okay. As a matter of fact, being a family member, it's even a little more difficult in that you've got to go not just even with what everybody does, but do a little bit more. Okay, to gain that dispensation of respect from the other members of the team. And the way you do that is you go above and beyond. Okay, you take those core values and you become the evangelist or the poster child for how those values play out inside the organization. When you do that, you will earn the respect of everybody else, and then you'll be able to take advantage of some of the freedom that comes from being a member of the family that maybe a typical employee doesn't do. But here's what's interesting. You see a lot of organizations say, well, we're not just a business, we're a family. Okay, even though they may not be blood related. Well, that's easier said than done because we don't treat everybody like their family.
Yeah.
And so, do you let a family member take off whenever they want to? Do you let them use company resources whenever they want to? And so having some of those dynamics figured out, and you've got, that goes to our third tenet, is you got to treat everybody the same. And so as a family member, you don't get to drive the company vehicle home every night. Okay? I mean, I've seen that happen, where they have vehicles that they use for work. Well, because his car's in the shop, he's going to take the company van home. And, well, he's got the company van at home. Well, somebody needs that van to go service a customer. And so now we've got some issues because he took the van home. And because he's in the family. So, it's just all these perceived things that they think it's okay to do this. And it creates some animosity on the part of the other members of the team.
And it really speaks to assumptions. And assumptions are a key theme through your work as I see it.
Absolutely.
So What assumptions do you find come up most often in family business, and how do you challenge them before they cause damage?
Well, the first assumption is that they're going to come in and do an exceptional job because they're a member of the family. Okay, not necessarily the case. I've seen situations where family members have been added to the business kind of as a safety net for the family member. They've tried this, they've tried that, they failed. This is kind of their last thing for them to have a job and make some money to support their family. It's almost like a rescue mission sometimes with the family member. And so it all comes back to setting those expectations and making sure there's clarity around that, and then also accountability. And that's the other thing that comes is you've got to hold the family member to the same standard of accountability that you do with everybody else in the organization. And so getting clarity around those deliverables, what they're accountable for, and holding them to that is one of the toughest things. Because when that role or that position is not performing well, then, just like you would with an employee, you've got to have those conversations, corrective action type conversations. And it's a whole lot easier with somebody that you're not going to see at the dinner table that night.
Yeah, for sure, because there's this threat of ultimately, if you're always red, you're going to get fired. Now, I'm assuming and I'm gathering that you're advocating to use scorecards.
Oh, absolutely.
Like we do everywhere.
Sure,
now,
absolutely.
It's one thing to introduce a scorecard to a new team member. It's another thing to introduce a scorecard to an existing an existing team member. But is there anything different that comes to mind when you've got to introduce a scorecard which brings formality and accountability to a family member when everything is operated so informally before? Is there any kind of minds to avoid?
Well, I think the key thing is, and again, it comes back to treating everybody the same. If you and I both know that scorecards are an invaluable tool inside any organization to managing expectations. It's impossible to hold somebody accountable to an expectation that's not clearly set. And one of the mantras I have with the people I work with is if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. And so, we could talk about it all day long, but we got to commit it to paper. And that's where the scorecard is such a valuable tool, because you can help them see clearly, this is what I expect you to do. And then they fall into that same evaluation process of quarterly feedback. We recommend quarterly conversations every 90 days to say, hey, are we on track? Are we doing in red, yellow, green? Are we getting done what we need to get done? And holding them to that same level of accountability that you would any other team member. And again, it comes back to expectations and accountability. If you're clear about the expectations, you can hold them accountable to it. But if you don't, it's impossible to do that because you get into that assumption trap.
Yeah. When you just said we have quarterly, I'll call them performance reviews or coaching conversations, I think you said.
Yeah.
I imagine there might be some listeners who shuddered a little bit and they were a bit like, well, no, I want to do it no more than once a year if I'm forced to. We recommend the same thing, but I know the resistance that we get from that. What's your take on why quarterly performance reviews with each team member?
Well, if you go back and look at the research, and Harvard's done research, Society of Human Resource Management has done research, they all came to the same conclusion that annual performance reviews are totally a waste of time and ineffective. You don't want to wait a year to tell somebody about something they screwed up on 10 months ago. Okay, yeah. That's the wrong time to bring it up, and they're going, I don't even remember that, and so they're hugely ineffective. But people always want to know where they stand. Am I doing okay? Am I on track? Especially if they have growth aspirations in their career. If they want to have additional opportunities to get a promotion or make more money, then you've got to know whether or not they're on track, and you don't want to wait too long. And 90 days is a long enough window to see change take place, but it's frequent enough that you can address things quicker. So that if we've got something that is not on track or not where it needs to be, then you can get right to that issue. The key thing, though, that I have found is consistency and structure, making sure that we have a conversation that is prepared for. That if you do it right, these conversations are 30 minutes, 45 minutes max, because we're coming in, we're talking about what's working well, what's not working well, what are we learning, and what do we need to do different. Then we set our objectives for the next 90 days. Okay. Now, it's not like you're not going to see them or talk to them in between that period of time, but the formal review to say we're on track should occur. It's a discipline. It's an organizational discipline. So if you can create that structure, and this is where the scorecards are so valuable, because you can review. This is what we expect. These are the outcomes we're after. Are we achieving those? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, kudos, great. Here, let's move on. The other thing too, though, is we also we believe in separating the compensation conversations from the performance conversations. I recommend that we review compensation annually. Okay. Unless you have some type of bonus program that's paid out in a more frequent manner. Quarterly bonuses are pretty popular, some of the companies I work with. But we separate the compensation and performance conversations so that we're strictly talking about, are we getting the job done? Are we getting it done to the level that we need it to be done at? And if we are, great, kudos, pat on the back. If we're not, then what are we going to do to get it back on track and make sure that's happening? And it's the same thing whether they're family members or not. And if you've got that level of discipline inside the organization, you're going to have a much greater chance of having a high-performing organization.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Tell me, what do you say to the owner who wants the business to continue through the next generation, but the next generation don't want to continue in the business? How do you manage through that situation?
Yeah, well, that's a great point. We actually talk about this in the book around this idea of succession. In doing some research, what we found was that even the best companies in the world, the Fortune 500, lose a ridiculous amount of money because they have poor succession planning. The number that was being kicked around in the research was like $1 trillion annually because of a lack or a poor succession plan. And there's all kinds of factors that go into that. But the key in a family business to have it go generation to generation is to, number one, ask. Hey, do you want to do this? Is this on your radar? Is this what you want to do? And I can give you a real example of this. When I was growing up in my family business, I was working for my dad. We had a service station where we worked on cars. And his expectation was that I would eventually take over the service station. Because I worked there before school, after school, weekends. And I was the thing that allowed him to have discretionary time to go fishing and do the things that he wanted to do rather than having to work all the time. And I didn't mind doing that. That was my contribution to the business. However, I didn't want to do that as a career.
Yeah.
And so when I informed him that I was going to go to college and get a degree, it was just like it totally messed up all his plans. Because his plan was for me to take this thing over. And it actually strained the relationship for probably a good 5 to 6 years until he saw that I could get through school and get a job and live on my own. But doing the work that we did was very hard work. And I just decided one day that I don't want to do this for a living. I think there's other better ways to do that. And so that was the reason I went off to college. But he had assumed, he never talked to me about it. It says, hey, do you want to take over the station one day? Probably been a good conversation to have before I made the decision to go to college. But he just assumed that I would just stay there and run the business. So that's the problem that we see is they think just because you love the business and you have this passion for it, that the child or the next generation will have that same level of passion. And I've seen it be a disaster when they bring in that person and they don't like the business, they don't want to be in the business, they feel it's out of a sense of duty to the family that they step into that role, and they just don't approach it the same way the patriarch does, and that creates some tension.
In the book, you share the interstate batteries story.
Yeah.
What made that so successful, and what can listeners learn from that?
So it was really interesting because Interstate was owned by a gentleman named Norm Miller, and his brother was the CFO. Okay, so they worked very, very well together. I mean, we didn't see too many conflicts between these two guys, and they were able to leverage each other's strengths. So it worked really, really well. But Norm had a son named Scott, and Scott had kind of messed around in two or three different types of businesses after he got out of college. Didn't really know what he wanted to do, but after 3 or 4 years of this job, that job, whatever, he finally approached Norm and says, I think I want to be in the battery business. And so Norm didn't just give him a senior level position. He made Scott work in every department in the company. And he actually worked for me for a period of time. And I was in the technology area. And so Scott had an opportunity to learn the business in each core function of the business. So that at the point in time when it was time for him to step into that leadership role, when Norm was ready to step out of the CEO chair, Scott was ready. And it was about a 10-year process from beginning to end for Scott to be ready to step into that chair. And when he did, the company flourished. I mean, the company did exceptionally well under Scott's leadership. And so, but Norm didn't just give it to him. He made him pay his dues, learn what he needed to learn. And when Scott stepped into that role, he was well respected, and he had the credibility because he had done the jobs. He had gotten out on a route truck. He had made the sales trips. He had done the accounting and all those things. So he had a very unique perspective on how the business worked. And he was able to bring some fresh ideas and some things that generationally, like the use of technology and things along those lines, he was able to bring that and inject that into the organization, so that there was some fresh ideas, some fresh perspective on stuff. And he actually did a very good job in that role.
Yeah, I love it. Simple advice. Work in many roles in the business so that you get a deeper understanding. It's a little bit timeless, to be frank, and I love it. That's really, really good. Now, Mike, I have the greatest respect for you, and we go back a long way. And so I ask this question anticipating the answer, but for you, what does a better business look like? When you think about a business, what does a better business look like?
Yeah, a lot of people measure business success based on the top line revenue, and that's really not a better business. A better business is one that meets the needs of the stakeholders in a way that they're able to have the life that they want. A better business is one that they're not chained to the desk. They can't take a vacation because they got to take care of the business. A great business is one where they've surrounded themselves with a capable team that can execute whether they're sitting there or not. That, in my opinion, is a great business and a better business because it's not dependent upon that owner or that founder. And when you can create that, and there's none of this that's easy. Okay, I mean that's the thing. I can't tell you how many books I've read. Well, just do this, just do this. Well, it's easy to say, hard to do, hard to implement. But if you know what you want, I mean that's the hardest thing for people to answer, Brad, is what do you want? Okay, because we have so many options, and if you can get clarity around the answer to that, what do you want? Then you can design it to produce that for you. You know, if you ever study the development of strategy, you know, one of the first questions you have to answer is what are your winning aspirations? What do you want this business to do? You know, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about earlier about succession planning. You've got to know if and how and when you want to exit the business. You know, we're all going to exit it in some shape, form, or fashion. Sometimes it's voluntary, sometimes it's not voluntary. But the reality is they will exit the business somewhere. down the road. And so do you want to exit on your terms? Do you want to exit on somebody else's terms? And if you can exit on your terms, you've got something that will allow you to retire, allow you to have the income that you need for the whatever period of life you're in. And for some, especially serial entrepreneurs, it's build it, sell it, build it, sell it, build it, sell it. It's the challenge of getting it going and getting it to a value proposition that somebody be willing to pay you for it. But having that clarity around succession and what it is that you want the business to produce, if you can nail that, then you can develop a strategy that'll get you there. And that's the challenge, I think.
I love it. Thank you, Mike. What's a book that you would recommend for our audience? You've already mentioned Candid Conversations and The Great Game of Business.
Yeah. Probably one of the best books I've read recently is a book by, I believe it's Chip Heath, called Reset. And what it does is it challenges a lot of our assumptions and thinking in the way that we view our business. And sometimes we need to step back and take a fresh perspective on things and really honestly evaluate what's working and what's not working. And sometimes we continue to perpetuate problems because we're not willing to do that honest assessment. And so in the book, Chip goes into great detail in how to do that evaluation. And then what do you do with it once you go through that process? So Reset from Chip Heath is one I'd highly recommend.
Lovely. How can people learn more about you and your business?
Probably the best way is visit our website at www.resultsimproved.com. And we have a lot of new stuff that we're rolling out. We have a group coaching program that we're rolling out, and really beginning to see some of the value of that dynamic of being in a peer relationship with other owners and seeing the value that people derive. It gets them what they need, but it also creates accountability with people that are fighting the fight just like we are. And so but I would go visit the website would be the number one thing.
Awesome. And what haven't we covered off that you wanted to cover off today?
I think that's it. The key thing, I always tell family business owners, give yourself a little bit of grace, okay? There's none of this that's easy. Okay, and don't try to flip the switch and everything be fixed immediately. Systematically identify the issues and begin to address them. Put that infrastructure in place of planning, execution, clarity around roles and responsibilities. It's just organizational discipline. And if you can get those things in place, you have a much greater chance of having the business that you want.
Wonderful. Well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us all today. As I suspected, it was a fascinating and insightful conversation. Deeply appreciated.
My pleasure, Brad. It's good to see you, my friend.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.